The next topic we're going to look at is STEM. So, specifically, how do we incorporate STEM into early childhood learning environment? So, what we're going to do is obviously define STEM, but we're also going to look at what are some appropriate STEM activities that you can include in your classrooms. And then, how would we practically do this depending on what kind of classroom you have, age level, and looking at really your daily routines and schedules with your children. So, what is STEM? So, STEM really looks at different subject matter. So, it would look at science, technology, engineering, and math. And how do we incorporate that into play and exploration for little ones? Okay, so there's a lot of research that's going on right now involved around STEM, and there is a lot of benefits they're finding to incorporating this even with young children. So it helps with problem solving skills, it supports hands-on inquiry, which like they're being more curious, really helping them in all learning domains, especially critical thinking, which is big during this time in their lives. And then really, besides going further than just curiosity, is really letting them be in charge of what's going on and asking those questions and really going a step further than just your basic standards in the classroom. And really, when they're doing this, it's helping them to be a lifelong learner and to love their learning process. Okay, so looking at what are some key principles when we're talking about STEM. These are non-negotiables. So one of the things that we have to think about is these activities are always going to be hands-on, right? We also have to think about they're open-ended, meaning that you don't have some cutesy cutting, like this is the activity, everyone does the same thing. You put the materials and you see where it goes, right? It's all about them exploring. So they're leading the activity, not you. That's the main thing. And then also, we have to learn to integrate STEM in all subject matters, in all learning domains. Now, what are some components? Obviously, teamwork is a big one. We have to think about how our children collaborating not only with you, the teacher, but with their peers. We want them to be able to share ideas, to learn from one another. Designing, we want them to be able to design things. Explore creative solutions, again, going back to that problem solving. And then looking at critical thinking. So you have to really plan these questions when you are using or incorporating open-ended questions, right? You have to plan it, but also take note of the questions that they're asking during these activities. Okay, so what are some examples? We're going to go over examples for each area. So we're going to start with science. Okay, so these are just some. There are plenty more, but these are the ones I just wanted to kind of offer. We have plant growth, so you could have them observe plants, right, if you want to do botany. So classroom garden is wonderful for this. If you have the room, you can do an outside garden or maybe even an inside garden. Using different materials and textures during play. Doing experience like simple things, baking soda and vinegar, and even looking at life cycles of different animals like the butterfly. So those are just some simple things that you could do with science. With technology, obviously the sky's the limit. It depending on your budget and what you can have in your classroom. Interactive whiteboards are in most classrooms, so this is something that's easy to use. Tablets, so incorporating some technology into your classroom. Also looking at some coding. Coding is a big thing. You wouldn't think about it with early childhood, but exploring the possibility of that is part of STEM. And then any kind of audiobooks you can incorporate. Engineering is also something that's taking off with early childhood. So going back to coding and whiteboards and audiobooks, but taking it a step further when we're actually starting to build these things. Are they actually coding themselves? Are you teaching early childhood to code? Are you teaching them? Can they do their own lessons on the board? So technology and the engineering is really going to be incorporating together. Now, math is something where we use a lot of manipulatives, right? With counting toys, we're looking at patterns and shapes and counting, but we're trying to make it playful and fun and learning, where they can build things, where they can measure, building structures, those sorts of things. Now, there are lots of resources I've listed here. Some of the main things I want to go over and talk about is thinking about using books, language. We talked about earlier integrating different learning domains. So there's lots of wonderful books out there specifically related towards STEM. I have them listed depending on, we have some children's literature on science, we have some on engineering and math and so forth. Okay. Also, there's items that you can bring in that are really cost effective. You don't have to think about. You can collect these things like scraps, boxes, tubes, stick. When we talk about tubes, it could be paper towel rolls, just different kinds of items to help bring in your classroom. Lids, pom-poms, all these things are viable resources for STEM. Now, one of the things that you just take note of is you as an educator has a role to play. You have to be creative with your planning, but you also have to learn that you are the facilitator, meaning that you have to let them lead it, but you have to have a place to start and plan for questioning. And you're more like the facilitator of the whole project, but really they're leading it. And you have to allocate planning time for these STEM activities, right? You can't just set it down and then not have questions and their engagement happening. There's some activities here on the slides. I'm not going to go through all of them because they're there for you to look at, but really thinking about different activities based on the age level. We have activities for babies, how you would do that with STEM for babies, depending on their age level. We have activities for toddlers, right? We have to think about each age group and some things that you can incorporate. Even some ideas for 3 to 6 year olds. So we have all the ideas for each age level group. Okay, so your role again, to reiterate, is implementation is so important. How are you setting these materials? How are you planning for science? How are you planning for math and engineering and technology? And what does that look like depending on the child's age? Now, one thing you do have to do when you're incorporating STEM is you have to observe, as I mentioned. You need to take notes. What's going on? What are the questions? How are they leading the activities? Does it seem like there's interest? Are you observing? What are they learning, right? And where is this going? Because it has to be observable. You have to have analysis and you have to reflect to see if there's changes that need to be made.